Thank you, Jim and Mike Ruggeri for inviting me. Thank you for all that you do for the field. And this new publication of the Aslander is really great. And it's just what we need, the sort of the bringing together of it's like the old Maya meetings at Texas where we brought together the academics with the non-academics, and everybody had something to share, and everybody felt a part of the excitement of the field. And that's what we want to continue, I think. And you and Jim Reed and Mike Ruggeri really deserve a lot of credit for this. And I also want to mention Joel Skidmore. He's been doing this for 100 years already, and and just out of the goodness of his heart, he's putting out these incredible publications, and the journal, the Pari Journal and whatnot. It just deserves enormous credit because they're doing it just because they love it, not because of not because it's going to be on their resume or they're looking for an advanced position at some academic institution, So kudos to all of you. And anyone else I didn't mention, I apologize, but those come to mind right now. The topic today, glyphs at Chichen Itza, outside the Maya tradition. I struggled with the title a long time, working with Peter Schmidt on this. He came up with the title in Spanish, Glyphs at Chichen Itza, ajenas de la tradición Maya, outside of the Maya tradition, because you can't really say they're non-Maya glyphs, although that's the term I use for shorthand. I say the non-Maya glyphs catalog. But we really don't know for sure, and we'll get to this at the end of the talk, I hope, a discussion about what does the presence of these glyphs mean? What can we infer from their presence? Because if the Maya themselves decided to start using glyphs that were not in their traditional system, but that they borrowed they borrowed conceptually from Western Mesoamerica, then they're still Maya glyphs, because the Mayas are the ones who invented them and used them and put them out there and carved them on the monuments for all to see. So they are still Maya glyphs in that sense. So more accurately in saying non-Maya glyphs would be glyphs outside the Maya tradition, the traditional classic Maya hieroglyphic writing. So Chichen Itza is, now I'm pressing my arrow to go to the next slide and it's not going. So we've already got to our first glitch. There, I'll press that arrow over there. Okay, so Chichen Itza is probably one of the most visited sites in the world. During the high season, it gets over 3,000 visitors a day, pre-COVID, 3,000 a day. And this iconic building is probably one of the most recognized buildings in the world. So, but it's amazing how much debate there still rages over Chichen and its occupants. Going back over 100 years, over 120 some years, to Maudsley's work at Chichen, we've known about the Maya glyphs, the non-Maya glyphs, or the glyphs that are not in the tradition of the ancient Maya. And these drawings by Annie Hunter, and boy, are these ever great drawings. I mean, the detail is magnificent. I'd like to see a biography of her sometime. Maybe there is one, I don't know. Maybe it's in the, anyway, we won't go on sidetrack. So this is an example of the glyphs that we're talking about. They usually occur above and in front of the person, but not always. Sometimes they're behind the person, but generally speaking, they're above and in front of the person. And they're generally about the size of the shoulders and head of the person, generally speaking. Later, in the early 20th century, the Carnegie Institution of Washington's extensive work at Chichen produced more examples, especially Jean Charlot's renderings, illustrations of the bas-reliefs from the Temple of the Warriors cluster. The Temple of the Warriors clusters include, now can you see my cursor going around and around?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So this is a Temple of the Warriors here. This down here is the northwest colonnade. This over here is the northeast colonnade. And underneath the Temple of the Warriors is the Temple of the Chakmul. And I'll take you down there and show you that also. So this is what Charlot is referring to as the Temple of the Warriors cluster, all these taken together. And this is an example of his pastel watercolors that was published. It's published in Morris, Charlot, and Morris, 1931. And here's 10 Rabbit, one of the few glyphs that we can actually read. Although, again, we don't know what language it's in. We don't know if this is in Mayan or in Nahuatl or Chontal. We just don't know. But anyway, here we have 10 Rabbit, one of the clearer examples of glyphs in this style. And in that publication of Morris, Charlot, and Morris, he illustrates, he compiles this group of images for the glyphs that were known at that time, but it's not a complete list. It's not a complete catalog. And he groups them, and it's tempting to do so probably. He groups them into themes like birds down here, up here, objects. So I have birds versus objects, and then miscellaneous animal representations. But he refers to them as name glyphs, and that's something that we need to talk about too, is are they name glyphs? It's different researchers have different opinions about that. Are they naming the individuals, or could they have something to do with the rank of the individual, or could they have something to do with the place of origin, such as in toponyms? Or as Mark Zender has mentioned in the like the Tizoc stone, they're not really toponyms so much as they are their ethnic identity, the ethnic identity of the person. So there's different possibilities of what these glyphs are, and I'll give you my opinion right now. Why not? Since I have the floor, I can give you my opinion. I think they have to be name glyphs because there's so many and they do not repeat. There's over 250 examples of these glyphs now at Chichen, and only less than one handful repeat, or maybe only 2 or 3 actually repeat. So there can't possibly be 250 different ranks or 250 different ethnic identities. There could possibly be 250 different toponyms, but I think it makes, Occam's razor, it makes more sense just to think that they're naming the individual that they appear with. Then later in the Carnegie publication on the Mercado at Chichen Itza, Carl Rupert's excellent publication. We see where that's located in Rupert's map. The dais there, or the bench as it's called, there are numerous examples of these glyphs in the Western Mesoamerican style. Here's Proskuriakos' incredible rendering, a restoration illustration of the dais, that's the bench, and the jamb. And this is what it might have looked like around 1000 AD. And here is the publication by drawings by William Lincoln in Rupert 1943 with his watercolors above and his line drawing below showing captives with these, I'll go ahead and say non-Maya glyphs because it's just shorthand. Here's a close-up example of a figure with the glyph in front of his forehead in the standard format. And then here's his line drawing of the same. And he has a rope tied to his hands. His hands are bound. I'll back up a little so you can see in the bottom drawing, you see clearly the rope connecting the prisoner's hands, their tied wrists. And then there's a figure in the center, a sacrificial scene, a figure in the center, and then the figures on the right are facing him to the left, and they also have their glyphs in front of them. So I think it's interesting that the prisoners are high enough status and high enough rank that they have their own name glyphs. So the prisoners themselves seem to be rather elite figures, worthy at least of being named in the glyphic writing. That's something to keep in mind. And then these are compiled in the Rupert publication, and these are really excellent drawings. And there's a compilation of those. So what I'm doing in this early part of my presentation is showing what we already know, what we've already known. Tauser's work, 1957, Chichen Itza and its cenote of sacrifice, gives a very, very brief, gives a very, very small sample of the drawings based on Maudsley. And the last two are probably not even glyphs. Well, the last one for sure is iconography. It's not a glyph, it's iconography. The second and the last one might be iconography and it might be a glyph. And I've included that actually in the glyph catalog. So I might be criticized for including iconography as a glyph or misinterpreting it, but I wasn't sure, so I went ahead and included it. So anyway, and the rest are taken directly from Maudsley. But Tauser gives a listing, enumeration of glyphs, and he separates them into Toltec and Maya. And I don't think very many people these days go along with Tauser's identification of the figures in the, he would identify the figures like in the Upper Temple of Jaguar murals as being either Toltec or Maya based on their appearance. And doesn't seem to be holding up very well. So take these numbers with a grain of salt. Plus the numbers don't really match. I went with Charlot's renderings and Charlot and Morris and counted the total number of glyphs that appear in that publication, and the numbers don't match these numbers. So anyway, this is just to give you an idea of what we have, or what we had up to, and for some reason this is not showing all on my screen. In 2010, and I'm not sure how to get this thing off my screen up here. I've got all these icons, these chat, share, pause, annotate, showing up and covering part of my picture. Oh well. So in 2010, we had the following numbers, about 140. non-Maya glyphs that were published in academic publications. And today we have almost double that number. So that's basically what I'm going to be showing you is how what we're presenting is a contribution to the field, in the sense that we systematically reviewed what's already known and then added to it. So back 10 years ago, Peter Schmidt and I embarked on this little project and produced this preliminary catalog of glyphs outside the Maya tradition at Chichen Itza. And I presented this catalog at a couple of different professional meetings, at the Mayistas meeting in Merida that UNAM puts on biannually, and also in Guatemala City at the Arqueología meetings there. And then I also gave copies, digital copies, to whoever showed an interest. And so this catalog has been out there for 10 years. And then more recently, Megan Rubenstein and I have assembled a revised and updated version 10 years later, on the anniversary of the first one, a catalog of non-Maya glyphs at Chichen Itza, assembled by Bruce Love and Megan Rubenstein. And this is available at brucelove.com. It's very, very simple to find and to download or use online. And to do this, we organized it according to buildings, the glyphs according to which building they were on. And we came up with this, essentially roughly going from the north to the south, from the North Ball Court Temple as the first building, all the way down to the principal group of the Southwest and the Atlantean columns at the south of the site. Here's the catalog as it appears online in Megan's and my blog, Contributions to Mesoamerican Studies. And I want to plug that. And I also want to encourage any of you with an interest in doing so to submit contributions for Megan and I to review and to see if perhaps we would like to publish your contribution. We have on this website, we have two types of contributions. We have corpus volumes, which you see here, past corpus volumes, and this has to do with hieroglyphic inscriptions, where we do it in the old corpus the old Harvard Peabody corpus format of photographs and drawings side by side. And that's what the corpus volumes are. No interpretation, no readings, no nothing, just photographs and drawings side by side, as in Ian Graham. And then the research contributions are then like articles or and they can be of any size, any range from 2 or 3 pages up to full-length articles. So please feel free to contribute to me or to Megan anytime. And so the thing that impressed me most when I compiled the list of the buildings was how widespread these glyphs are. I had thought they were just mostly, the ball court and the Warriors Temple complex, but it turns out they're all over Chichen Itza, from the farthest north to the farthest south, not the farthest south, but to the south. And so that's really impressive. And these are really, really widespread and need to be known by the people in our field. It needs to be acknowledged how widespread these are, how ubiquitous they are. And so here's more of a close-up of the central area of the site. So we have North Temple at the ball court, Upper Temple of Jaguars, Lower Temple of Jaguars, South Temple. Then we have the Temple of the Warriors, the Northwest Colonnade, the Temple of the Chakmul, the Northwest Colonnade dais, and the Northeast Colonnade, and the Temple of the Sculpted Columns, and the Mercado, and the Stolok Temple, and the Osario. All those have examples of non-Maya glyphs, which of course accompanies the iconography, the so-called Toltec iconography, or the Western Mesoamerican iconography, the warriors, the figures, the priests, and all that, which is well known and has been known for a century. So starting with the North Temple of the Ball Court, we have the West Column and East Column. Is very interesting right off the bat. We have, these are drawings by Linda Sheely in her Sheely and Matthews volume. And there we have these glyphs, which are actually quite well known from central Mexico. The one on the right being called the reptile eye. And what's most interesting about these is pointed out, and as far as I know, Linda and Peter were the first to point out, but I may be wrong about this, that these two figures actually appear in two places. They appear here and in the lower temple of jaguars. And these exact same figures appear here with the exact same glyphs. And you can, and not only that, they have the same iconography. So you see the figure on the left with a straight rod in his hand, and the figure on the right with his serpent staff. And if we go back to the North Temple, the figure on the left has the serpent staff with the same name glyph, and the figure on the right has the long staff, the straight staff. Those are the exact same figures with the same accoutrements, same iconography. And look at that long necklace with the mask hanging from it. Same things here. So that's the same figures. But this is rare indeed. We do not find the same figures and the same glyphs repeated in other places at Chichen Itza. And here's a photograph from 2019, just showing the present condition of the back wall. I was, really honored to have the permission to photograph these nighttime photography. So this shows, especially the reptile eye, you can barely make out. So it just shows how valuable these early drawings are. These early drawings are priceless because these things are wearing away. Look at their feet. I mean, their sandals, their shoes, it's almost completely gone just from the moisture and the limestone eroding away over time. So we should thank our lucky stars for these early researchers who produced this data. And that's what the only thing I'm trying to do, and Megan and I are trying to do here, is just produce data so that it's out there for people to use. I mean, George Stewart, rest his soul, encouraged me. He says, just produce data. Let other people argue about the data, but just, if you really want to do something valuable, produce the data. And so that's what we're doing here. And then other people can discuss it all they want forever. What does it all mean? And then, okay, so moving on, what a lot of people don't realize, and what I certainly didn't realize for a long time, was that inside the lower temple of jaguars, on the east vault. So if you walk in and turn around and face east and look up, there's a whole carved panel there that Maudsley did not record. And that the only recording of it up until recently was Merle Green Robertson, bless her soul. And may she rest in peace. She did rubbings of that entire upper vault. And again, we have figures. Look, here's a figure leaning forward. There's his nose and his mouth. He's leaning forward, grasping the darts, the atlatl darts, in his left hand. And there is his name glyph, the jaguar. And then the next figure over here, again, leaning forward with the atlatl darts in his hand. And this is his name glyph, perhaps a bowl or a saucer, hard to know for sure. But Merle did this way back in the 90s. And she put these out in that, I remember getting this 5 CD or DVD, a set of 5, I think it was 5 DVDs with her glyphs, or with her rubbings, excuse me, with her rubbings. And that's where I got these images from for the catalog, was from those DVDs that Merle and Joel put out 30 some years ago. And thank you all for that, because they're high resolution and they're wonderful. And as I'll point out again, I think, if I remember to, there are details in Merle's rubbings that are not in the drawings and watercolors of Charlot and others. And Merle's rubbings, I think, are highly underrated. They are a really, really valuable resource. This is a current photograph of the entire eastern, the entire eastern vault. And I'll show close-ups because it's hard to make out anything from this, just to show you what the whole vault. You can see over here on the left, this kind of diagonal line, that's the slope of the vault going upward. And then that was my photographs from 2019, from standing inside there and shooting up. And then the drawing I made after I got back home. You can see those 2 registers of figures, the upper register here and the lower register here. These are not captives, these are warriors. They all have atlatls and darts, and they all have name glyphs. And here's a close-up of them. There's a photograph above, and that's the actual color. It's still there on the wall up above, and there's a drawing below. So here's 3 figures. The figure on the left, the face is gone, but you can see a glyph up here. Who knows what it is? Figure in the center, the face is gone. In his right hand is the atlatl, which is a weird shape here, but that's the shape it is in the photograph. You can see the photograph up here. And then the darts in the left hand, and then the feathers in the headdress, and then here's his name glyph. And then over here on the right, another with the butterfly pectoral, with the hallmark of the Toltec or Central Mexican warriors, the atlatl darts, and the name glyph, perhaps a bird. It looks like a bird. A lot of bird glyphs. So here's the glyphs. So moving on, the upper temple of jaguars, which Maudley produced. Here's Annie Hunter's drawings. Interesting here, when you have doubled glyphs, that suggests phoneticism. It suggests that that's a feather. If those are feathers, perhaps kook for cuckoo. I mean, it's a guess. Or it could be in Nahuatl, whatever the word for feather is in Nahuatl. We don't know. The south temple, where the white arrow is, has this rather famous collocation. Again, Merle's rubbings that Linda and Peter pointed out, and others could be Kan Ek, because Kan Ek is a well-known Maya name, and Kan for snake and Ek for star. This could very well be Kan Ek, but it could also be Nahuatl, whatever the word for star and snake in Nahuatl. It could be Coat star. And then moving forward, now I'll take you down, and those of you who haven't had a chance to get down into the Chakmul temple, it's quite an adventure. It's exciting to get down in there. This is the entrance that was built by the Carnegie Project and preserved by them. They exposed the Chakmul temple, and they beautifully preserved the pillars with their painted reliefs. And then they enclosed the whole thing in the warriors' temple, preserving them, and created a staircase down to get down there, which one can access today. And this is the stairway going down into the Chakmul temple. And here's what it looks like inside. And these columns do not have non-Maya glyphs on them, but there was a bench on the south side. And here's Charlot's watercolor of the bench that does have glyphs. And here is an example in the center of one of the glyphs, a seated figure that appears in front of a seated figure. The seated figure is the glyph in front of a seated figure holding a snake staff here. And there's a number of these which are now in the catalog. And these no longer exist. The bench is gone, the watercolors are gone, it's all gone. The only thing we have is Charlot's drawings, and probably Carnegie photographs that have not been published that are in the archives at Peabody. But I haven't looked for those, so I don't know. And then the Warriors Temple itself, we have Charlot's watercolors and line drawings. There we have the 10 rabbit example. And then the Northwest Colonnade dais, which is the bench, has a few. Here's a plan drawing of the dais. And then this one is, this top one is iffy because there is some iconography that looks like this, but I went ahead and included it. There's Charlot's drawing and then Merle's rubbing of the same thing. The thing is, it's in the exact location where these glyphs appear. So I went ahead and included it at the risk of being criticized for including iconography. There are other cases where this same form appears where it looks more like it's just like a scroll or a flame or something, iconography. But I went ahead and included it in this case. Northwest Colonnade outlined here. And these are Charlot's drawings. And these, we have Merle's rubbings for many of them, but not all of them. But we really need photographs and new drawings. So, I mean, there's a year's worth of work left to do on just on these glyphs alone to get night photography and then drawings to really update the catalog. There's a good doctoral dissertation there for someone maybe. The Northeast Colonnade, again, not yet published in full. I like this one, a very interesting one. This was published by Oliver Ricketson. Then in the group of the 1,000 columns on the eastern side, there's a Temple of the Sculpted Columns. And Peter Schmidt restored these columns to their current state. These were fallen, these drums of carved stone, these circular drums of these columns were fallen. And Peter, bless his soul, restored all these with winches and hoists and block and tackle and chains, and he lifted them into place and cemented them back into place. And then I was honored to have the permission to get in and to photograph them. These are their numbers, and you'll notice that most of them are columns, but there are some jams. 21, 22, 23, and 24 are jams on the end of walls and not columns. So I'll show you those examples too. And not all have glyphs. Because of a limited time, I only photographed the columns with the glyphs. with figures with glyphs. And it's a shame that I couldn't photograph every column and every side. But limited budget, limited time, we do what we can. But anyway, we have, prior to the photographs, we had Merle's rubbings, which are excellent again. And we had Guillermo Cowo's field drawings. Memo Cowo is really an unsung hero also. He was Peter Schmidt's field illustrator, and not being trained in Maya art history or Mayan studies at all, being basically a milpero from Santa Elena who was hired on as a worker and then showed an inclination for illustration. And Peter, brought him on as a field illustrator for Peter's project. And these are his drawings of these columns. So you see this interesting dog figure. It's a dog, but what kind of leg, what he has for legs, very interesting, open for speculation, just what's going on there. And then here is the photograph and drawings from 2019. So we now have good high resolution photographs and drawings of all the figures with inscriptions, with the non-Maya glyphs. And there's a close-up, the photograph above and the drawing below. And then again, here's Merle's rubbing and Memo Cowo's drawings, and then the photographs, the Love's photographs, and Love's drawings. And so we have that for all the figures with inscriptions. Here's one with numbers, but most of them are just objects. And many of them are partially erased, difficult to see what they are. Stars, easy to see. Interesting objects, very interesting. So we have this new data, and this is new to the catalog, So that's an important contribution, I believe. This seated figure is interesting because one of the Tula glyphs has a seated figure like this. So this kind of matches one of the Tula glyphs. And these are the jams. The jams, they have figures, they're narrower because they're not round columns, they're just have a flat face. They're holding up the roof, the beams that support the roof, and between their hands are the glyphs, in this case, on the left side and the right side. So that's it for the sculpted columns. And now to the Mercado. It's Carnegie photograph of the Mercado. Here's a dais here, reconstructed by them. Oh, there. And here's a drawing of it, plan drawing. And here's Lincoln's drawings from the Rupert publication. And we have Lincoln's watercolors, line drawing, and then drawing, three-dimensional drawing. Excellent work by William Lincoln in Rupert's publication. And all I'm adding is new photographs. And it's interesting what's missing. We have whole panels of stones missing now. I don't know where they are. I have no idea. And that's important information, or important to know that they're missing. So this is night photography of the same panels. Again, missing facing stones. Where are they? And all three sides with the feathered serpent and the stars, the star signs in this body of the serpent. So now we have Lincoln's illustrations and the Love photograph. That's the addition to the catalog, is the new photographs. It's all important data. The Osario, this is important. Most of us are familiar with the study that's been done on the inscriptions. And the date, 998, después de Cristo, after Christ. 998 after Christ is the date on this pillar, which is up here inside the temple at the top. It's the southeastern pillar of the 4 pillars on top. And we have this date, but what's fantastic to me is on the side adjacent to this side, we have a drawing with a non-Maya glyph on it. Unfortunately, it's really hard to make out, but thanks to Kowo's drawing, it's this little figure here is one of the non-Maya glyphs over the head of this figure. And this is on the same pillar as the date. So in essence, we have dated the non-Maya glyphs to 998 AD. So that's pretty amazing. We have a date for the glyphs. And it fits perfectly with the iconography of the Toltec iconography, the so-called, what's it called? Modified fluorescence or international style, or the Toltec iconography. I prefer to call it Western Mesoamerican rather than Toltec, but anyway, we have a date for at least one example of that glyph here at the, in a plug for Megan's and my blog. One of our publications was Love and Reddick, in which we revisited these dates again and confirmed the 998 AD date. So moving on. Now the temple of the wall panels, or retablos in Spanish, here, and I had known about these forever, but it didn't occur to me till fairly recently, till after I published the 2011 preliminary catalog, that we have them here too. And this is again a new photograph, a nighttime photograph with side-raking light. And down here at the bottom, this is Rupert's rendition, which is basically a photograph that's colored in so you can see it. Each one of these prisoners with their arms tied behind their backs has a feline glyph in front of their heads. So they all have the same glyph. Instead of, just when you think you understand the pattern of the naming, where each figure has its own glyph, then you come across something that breaks the pattern, which is each one of these figures has the same glyph, repeated over and over. So the same glyph, this feline head, repeats, and these are all captives. And here they are, the photograph and the drawing. These aren't really drawings, they're Rupert's colored in, so to speak, photographs to enhanced photographs. So there's a different example, another example of non-Maya writing. And then we have what are only known because of Guillermo Coelho's field drawings that are in Peter Schmidt's field notes, which are in Peter Schmidt's house in Merida. And 2 years ago, I spoke with Pepe Osorio, who was at Riverside, UC Riverside, at a conference. And he said that they are maintaining Peter's house as an archive for all, not only Chichen, but especially for all his Chichen archives. And he has shelves and shelves of field notes. And so I'm reminiscing of I have fond memories of spending evenings on Peter Schmidt's front porch and his wife Peely bringing us coffee, Nescafe, and with tablespoons of artificial creamer and sugar, and beaten, whipped up to a foamy mixture, and then cookies. And then Peter going into his house and coming out with these binders with Guillermo Covo's drawings, his field drawings, and allowing me to photograph them. And so we have further examples from the Stolok Temple, from the Phalos, which is in the initial series group, from the Atlantean columns, and then from way down south in the principal group of the Southwest, from 2 different buildings. And there are 17 glyphs from the principal group of the Southwest, building 5B16. We have 17 examples thanks to Schmidt's field drawings. And then 8 more glyphs also from the principal group of the Southwest at a different building 5B19. And these are fallen blocks. These are fallen blocks on the ground. These columns are not restored yet. And so basically that's a brief rundown of the glyphs. And here's the catalog that Megan put together. I mean, I supplied the material, and Megan did this incredible job of putting together the catalog systematically. And we created our own catalog numbers. So we used we created like an acronym, basically just using the initials, LTJ, Lower Temple of Jaguars. And then if it had figure numbers, like these are the figure numbers assigned by Maudsley, D18 and D19, D20. These are these are, wait a minute, let me go back up. Where was I? Lower Temple of Jaguars. Let's go down here. A3, at the bottom of the page, you see Lower Temple Jaguars, A3, A4, A5. These are the figure numbers assigned by Maudsley. And then on the eastern panel, up above, where we had only Merle's rubbings until 2019, and now we have photographs and drawings, we decided to just continue with Maudsley's numbering system. So where Maudsley left off with the C numbers on the north wall of the Lower Temple of Jaguars, then we continue then with D, and we numbered them D, so D18, D19, D20, etc. So anyway, that's our numbering system. And in some cases where like in the case of the Southwest, the principal group of the Southwest, we don't have a name for the building, so we use the Carnegie designation, 5B16, 5B19. And then we just numbered them in taking off Schmidt's field notes. So anyway, that's this catalog system. And you can see the blue link that you click on the link and it'll take you to the page in the catalog. And these are just sample pages from the back of it. At the end of the catalog, in the appendix, is this catalog that Megan put together so well. And so after we're done with the PowerPoint, I'm going to take you to the catalog itself, and we can look through it, go backwards and forwards, up and down, just to sort of show you how the links work. And then we'll open it up for discussion or whatever. But in anticipation of our discussion, what can we read from the glyphs? I mean, although we can't read the glyphs, what can we infer from their presence, right? What can we infer that these glyphs appear? Now, Jeff Roswell and his group, refining the chronology of Chichen Itza, points out that almost all academics that now work in the northern lowlands considered Chichen to have been a Maya site throughout its history, even throughout the 10th and 11th century, although the exact origin of the Itza continues to be a discussion theme. In other words, the idea of long distance migration, which used to be in the days of Morley and Thompson and on up to today with Coe and Houston proposing the Quetzalcoatl invasion of Chichen Itza, which is, they're still proposing that, while most Mayanists don't want to accept that there were the foreign migration played that big a role. So it's sort of a dichotomy there. Ringel, it represents the side that it's really all Maya. He says, even though he admits that, okay, there were external visitors, although external visitors may have been present, but not a population replacement. But there was not a population replacement. So the extreme view would be that the Chichen Itza was replaced by foreigners. That's an extreme view, and I'm not sure anyone's really promoting that. But it is proposed that an elite group of warriors came in and either probably conquered or replaced the Maya leadership and set up this hierarchy with themselves at the top. But those that perhaps we can say that, and Bill's here in the audience, so I don't want to speak for him, but his writing speaks for him, that the Maya were still the people, the agent of change. The Maya invited the external visitors in, and the Maya mediated the change to a Toltec ideology. So it was still the Maya that were in charge, and the Maya that were doing the changing over to the Toltec ideology, Western Mesoamerican iconography. Somebody's unmuted somewhere. Anyway, for me, when I came across what Saylor wrote 100 years ago, I don't think I could have said this better. I mean, for sure I couldn't. I wouldn't put myself in the same class as Edward Saylor. I think this says it all. The fact that these figures are named by miniature pictures introduced behind or above their heads is of striking significance. This so much resembles Mexican picture writing and is so different from what we see in Maya manuscripts and reliefs now known, that this act, in my opinion, would alone be sufficient to assign these Chichen Itza reliefs, and therewith this entire class of Chichen Itza edifices. In other words, the reliefs with the non-Maya glyphs, which are representative of the entire class of Maya buildings that were built at this time to a people descended from the Mexican, or at least closely akin to them in culture. I second Saylor. That's my opinion. My personal opinion, these glyphs and these iconography are from the Itzas. These are the Itza people that came in at around, in the 10th century, following Eric Thompson. I know I'm a Luddite. I still, I still hold on to a lot of what Eric Thompson said and give him extreme credit. I think they came from the Gulf Coast, the Chontal regions, where Nahuatl and Maya merge. That's where we have the Nahuatl and Maya merging in the Chontal area, the Gulf Coast. And this has been known for a long time. The Itza themselves say they came from Nonohualco. Later, in the later centuries, the Xiu came from there. And it's interesting that the final invasion and conquest of Yucatan came from there. It was staged by Montejo the Son, was staged from the Chontalpa, was staged from Cotamalhuapa. And with their Central Mexican allies, they marched up, they took canoes up to Champoton, and from Champoton marched overland up and invaded and conquered and settled in Merida and established Spanish rule. From the same path, the same pattern as the Sioux before them, and probably the Itzas before them. So I think that's the pattern, and probably the the Teotihuacanos in the 4th century. Anyway, so they invaded Yucatan, established their power. I think it's probably militarily, because they're all shown with their spear throwers, their power signs of military power. They established their power center at Chichen Itza. They didn't replace the Maya. The Maya were still 95% of the population, but the Itza were at the top. And they embarked on a tremendous construction program. They rebuilt the entire site from north to south. Imagine the wealth it would have taken to do such an enormous amount of construction, of stone carving and stone building. The whole platform, the enormous central grand nivelacion, the central platform, unbelievable amount of wealth and power to do that. These were the Itza, and that site was named after them and always known for them ever since, completely changing the site in their own image. And with it, they introduced a new system of pictographic naming with some fanaticism, appropriate for an international power center of religion, science, and commerce. So there you have it. Thank you very much for your attention. That's my presentation.
Thank you, Bruce.
Now, yeah, go ahead.
Sure that people are getting their questions in to the chat feature, and that you can do that. Bruce, on your map of looking down on the Temple of the Warriors, and especially where the different locations were that you've encountered these glyphs, if you were standing on the Temple of the Warriors, to your right is another structure that appeared in your photo of the Temple of the Warriors on the left-hand side. Is that the Temple of the Door Jams or something like that?
Mesas. It's called Mesas.
Temple of the Mesas. Well, years ago, I think it was Peter Smith took my group down to see the painted columns that are underneath that. And I mean, the colors are just seem to be so much more than what's surviving below the Temple of the Warriors now. But are you aware of that? Are there any glyphs down there?
There are no glyphs on those. I am definitely aware of them. I have photographed them and compiled them into a complete compilation along with the Chacmul pillars. So those are completely recorded but not yet published.
Huh.
And yes, they are amazing, the colors in there.
And let's see, Maya Popovic is asking, what's the reason for the night photography?
The reason for the night photography is to bring out the clearest details. When you do, as Ian Graham has shown us, you do a straight-on portrait of the monument or the panel or the stela or whatever it is, and then you have the light coming from a side at a sharp raking angle, and that brings out the relief, the carving, so that you can see the details. And I always like to add, it's fascinating to me that when Charles Lindbergh flew over Yucatan to record the temples sticking up out of the jungle canopy, he would fly at dusk and dawn to get the side raking light from the sunrise and the sunset. And that's how he photographed the peaks of the pyramids coming out of the jungle canopy back in whatever year that was that Charles Lindbergh flew over Yucatan using the same principle of raking sidelight.
And
If
then
you'd
we have
like,
another
I could show
question.
the, oh, go ahead. All right.
No, you continue.
I was going to show the catalog, but I'm not sure what I'm showing on my screen right now. I think let me, if I open up my catalog, do you see the front page of the non-Maya Glyphs catalog now?
Not yet. You still have the PowerPoint open. So maybe diminish that or make it a small icon, and then now open your PDF.
Now, you have it now?
Not yet. Are you screen sharing it?
Oh, I forgot to click on screen share. Screen share. Screen share, there. This should do it. Come on, there. Now you have it, right?
Still the sand dune.
Really?
There it is.
I clicked on, there it is,
Yeah, now do the 100%.
100%. There, and I don't know if y'all see each other in the Hollywood squares, but Megan, you want to raise your hand? If your picture's up, I don't know. Megan put this catalog together. She's amazing. She's my co-publisher at brucelove.com. And so, and this catalog is, as all our material on brucelove.com is open access for everyone to share internationally, anywhere, anytime, without having to get written permission. Just, it's yours to share. And I think that's the way it should be in our field. And people who hoard data are not doing anybody a favor. So anyway, here's our catalog and the introduction.
Let me just say, Megan is with us. I asked her to put on her video, and I got a little message that Megan will share her video in a little while.
Okay.
She's here with us. She's listening to us.
So I just wanted to show how, how the catalog works. We can go so for instance, Great Ball Court, GBCNT, Great Ball Court, North Temple, #1. And down at the bottom, you can click on appendix to the glyph catalog, and you click on that and it links you to the catalog, and there's the GBC North Temple #1. And then from there, if you want to click on the page number, you can click there and it takes you back to the page number. And then if you want, you can go back to the table of contents by clicking on table. So Megan put on all these links in, which makes it so easy to navigate through this thing. So for each example, for each building, I gave the Carnegie nomenclature, the Carnegie drawing when possible, and then a photograph where possible, and then a close-up, and then the glyphs themselves. And then for each glyph, I gave all examples known. So here's Sheely and Matthew's drawing. Here's Sheely and Matthew's drawing, Merle's rubbing. So in some cases, we have 2 or 3 examples of each glyph. Some cases, just 1 example of each glyph. And in the catalog, we give all examples of each glyph. So if we went down to the catalog, you see if there's a drawing and a rubbing, you see both examples. If it's just 1 example, you see just that 1 example. In some cases, like, excuse me for scrolling through, there an example, there's 4 examples. There's a drawing, a rubbing, another drawing, and a photograph, and a watercolor. So that's just to show you the catalog, and it's you're all welcome to have it, to download it, publish from it. You don't need to ask permission. And just go to brucelove.com and there it is. So I think I'm done now, and I'd be happy to take questions.
Early on, you might have elaborated on this, especially towards the end of your program, but Monet is asking, you say non-Maya, but not Toltec. So will you give us your ideas who created them? Maybe if you could encapsulate that
The reason
into
I
like
say,
one paragraph.
well, the reason I say not Toltec is because in comparing them to Toltec glyphs, the Toltec pillars at the temple at Tula, is they don't appear the same. The one glyph appears the same, the seated figure, but there's only six examples from Tula on those pillars, and there's 260 in Chichen Itza. So I would say, instead of saying they're Toltec, they're in the Western Mesoamerican tradition. They're in the tradition of other epi-classic / post-classic, and there's a debate about whether or not they're epi-classic or post-classic. I like post-classic. I think they're post-classic. I mean, but I'm not an expert on archaeology. I'm not as expert as some of the people in the audience here who know every stone and every C14 date that is ever produced. You know, I certainly don't, but I call it post-classic. And they're Western Meso. So if they came from the Gulf Coast is where all that strong Western Mesoamerican influence was. And at the time of the Spanish invasion, there were the Pochteca were there from Tenochtitlan, you know, poised to enter Yucatan through the Chontapa, through the Chontal region. That was the bottleneck through which all peoples came from central Mexico. And so there was strong, it's well known and well documented that there was very, very strong Nahua influence in the Gulf Coast region throughout time. And that's where the Itzas came from, who established their reign over Chichen Itza.
And I've heard that the Itza stayed along the coast there by Chetumal for like as much as 260 years before they moved inland. Is that?
Well, in their chronicles, I really don't go by their chronicles in the Chilam Balams, because, you know, all peoples, as Bill Ringel pointed out and others have pointed out, all Mesoamerican peoples create their own history. They create their mythology of their migrations, and it isn't necessarily historically accurate. It doesn't have to be historically accurate. It's what they create as their history. And that's what the Chilam Balam, and I think that's what you're referring to about they spent so many 100 years, so many cartoons in Pole or in, you know, on the East Coast, and then they came there, and it's all to be taken as, I think, as created history.
Yeah, there's even a sign I photographed that says that they stayed here for 260 years before they went to Chichen Itza. But
Yeah, it
let's
says
see.
that.
Mateo Garcia is asking, could they have been a group of warriors that weren't important, but dressed as jaguars when captured, or maybe they were captives of the jaguar warrior group? I don't know, I'm not an expert, but I'm very interested.
I think he's speaking of the captives there. An interesting question. Yeah, why were they, if they were captives, were they really warrior captives? Were they high-ranking jaguar? I guess you're probably talking about the retablos, where it shows the captives each with a jaguar glyph, or the feline glyph.
Right, feline.
Could not necessarily jaguar, it could be puma or whatever, but feline. Yeah, good question. Don't know the answer.
And then Jeffrey Braswell has some comments here. He ends up with bravo, but he adds, I'm not sure anymore that there were no foreigners at Chichen Itza. I just want to put forward that the evidence for foreigners at Chichen is much stronger than any classic site with Teotihuacan influence. But honestly, I think we need to carefully rethink the extreme, it's Maya only, but don't quote him on that. And he's asking.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff, and I'm flattered that you attended, and Bill Wrinkle's here too. We ought to put them up on
No,
opposite sides.
honored to be
Anyway,
here.
great to have you. And as Ringle points out, we don't have archaeology of the household groups of where's the barrio. If there was this Itza presence, we would have Itza barrios on the outskirts of Chichen, and we don't have the archaeology of those settlements yet, and that's sorely needed. I think Jeff and Bill would both agree on that. We need archaeology of the household groups and seeing what foreign artifacts we find there.
You want to say anything, Jeffrey? I guess not. But he does ask, does anyone have details regarding Agustin Peña's Toltec warrior burial at Chichen Itza? It might have been dug around 91, 92. Have you heard of that, Bruce?
No.
Hello, Jim.
Jim?
Yes.
Just a little word quickly from our studies that is up over many years. The beginning dates there pushing back to 600 BC. And evidence is showing their migrations through time and reaching up into Mexico. And then in the late Classic, that Mexican influence moving back along the Gulf Coast and up the Usumacinta River back into Guatemala. And this whole period shows the Popol Vuh, even though it's late, that the investiture of the Popol Vuh during that late period was being sent up through northern Yucatan to receive their authority and investiture to bring back home into highland Guatemala. And that influence coming out of the Gulf Coast, we're finding a lot of evidence of it spreading on down the Pacific coast into that southern territory. I think there's a good influence for a lot of speculation maybe still, but I think that has some significance.
Thank you, Garth.
Thank you, Garth. Let's see. John Diago says it's an important and awesome presentation and that George Stewart would be so proud. Thanks to Bruce and Megan for all this work. And let me see. We down to the last one? There's a tremendous variation in the structure of the non-Maya glyphs. Some contain cartouches, others don't. The sequence and placement of bar and dot numerals vary. Some bars are wrapped in the manner of Xochicalco writing system. So in a cosmopolitan city, why does this writing necessarily represent one Mesoamerican script?
Okay, well, my answer is that it is Chichen script. And that is a script invented by and adapted by the rulers of Chichen Itza. And so it is Chichen script, just like Kakashla is Kakashla script, and the others that the reviewer just mentioned are, and the Tula script and the other epi-classic, post-classic scripts of Mexico are named by their sites. So why not name this script by its site, by Chichen Itza? So this is Chichen Itza writing, in my opinion.
And Jeffrey agrees. He said, whatever the source is, this is essentially an invention at Chichen Itza. And it took more than 100 years to develop, roughly from 900 to 1,000, the common area. And Annabeth says, good point about the multiple script styles. And these were mariners who contacted a lot of people.
Yes, I think we need to remember the economic aspect of mariners, the powerhouse, and I put that in my statement. It's a religious powerhouse and a military powerhouse and an economic powerhouse, those three together. So the speaking of trade, so you would expect to find a more international type script at a trade center, an economic powerhouse. A tolan, as Bill Ringo so well pointed out, this is a tolan from the post-classic or epi-classic period. And let's not forget the economics of it. Imagine the wealth it took to build such an enormous site at that time.
And Jeffrey says maybe they were borrowing from other sites, from Tula to Cotzmalguapa, but this writing system came together at Chichen, as Bruce has shown. Megan's chiming in. She's here, but her video is not working at all. So we won't be able to, we'll be able to wave, but she won't be able to wave to us. And Annabeth says, great point, Jeff. Chichen was the melting point that attracted these folks and blended them together. Fabian says, great presentation, Bruce. Is there any correlation for the age of the carvings with the architectural structure sequence at the buildings at Chichen? I think you
they're
mentioned
one and the same. They're one and the same. The carving, as Saylor pointed out, the carvings and the buildings that they're on, they're one and the same. The modified fluorescent or international style or Toltec style or Western Mesoamerican style carvings and buildings. That was an enormous building program that covered the almost entire site. And if excuse me for going on too long, but I just remembered something, a very important point to bring out is that the traditional Maya writing continued to be available and would continue to be used into this period. So it was used at the same time, such as we have on the pillar on top of the osario, we have the Maya script with a double date and on one side, and the non-Maya script on this adjacent side of the same pillar. That's not the only place we get it. We also get the so-called sacrificial stone or ball court marker that George Stewart published years ago. Linnea Wren published in George Stewart's series that has Toltec iconography with Maya glyphs. We also have the Maya glyphs at the temple of the principal group of the Southwest, Old Castillo Viejo, which is published in Joel Skidmore's amazing series, the Fari Journal. The Maya glyphs there. And what's fascinating about those glyphs is that you have Toltec iconography, you have Maya glyphs, classic Maya glyphs, but reading the glyphs, they have the name glyphs in the Central Mexican style, in the sense that 8 Akbal is a name of the Lord. So the Lord is named with a calendar name, and naming by calendar name is a trait of Western Mesoamerican naming. So you have naming with a Maya calendar, 8 Akbal, on a building of the modified fluorescent or international style, and you have the classic Maya writing, all combined.
And Evan Albright makes an interesting comment. He goes, have you read La Casa Real de Cocom, The History of the Yucatan? And that the Mexicanized glyphs on the pillars on the upper temple of the Jaguar appear to correspond to the name title of the Cocoms.
I have seen that article by Peter Biro and
Right, Eduardo.
Perez. Juan Perez de Heredia.
Mhm.
And I've seen it, I've read it. I'm not buying it yet, but I think it's intriguing. I don't think it's like trying to decipher a writing system when you don't have enough examples to decipher it. Yes, I can see how these signs match name signs, and I think it's important that they point this out. And I thank them both for pointing this out.
Yeah.
And I consider myself being a colleague in good standing with both these folks. So keep on publishing. We'll hold this up as a strong possibility at this point.
And C. Wiley says that at El Tajín, he and Rex Kuntz
Kuntz.
have independently identified name glyphs from 2 different classic Veracruz scripts.
Great. And that's, I'm sure, if it's published, it should be published. You can put in the chat the publication citation, or most of us, most academics here in the audience already know about it if it's published.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for that. That's important. Rex does good work there, and of course.
And Annabeth Hidrick says, really wonderful work, and the generosity of you sharing your work freely is so commendable. And from there, Geoffrey has his hand up. Why don't you say a few things, Geoffrey? Unmute yourself. You got to unmute. I'm asking him.
Okay, I'm sorry. I've had trouble with this all day long. I hope you can hear me. And I've actually tried to text this. Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Bruce, for a wonderful presentation of such amazingly important work. And thank you for acknowledging Peter Schmidt, who really deserves huge acknowledgement for this work of this great project that you were part of and I've been part of, going back to the last millennium. He was a great soul. We had a wonderful talk, and I've sort of been thinking about it in my COVID brain for the last few days since we talked. And I hope you don't mind me going through some chronological issues, and I'll take the blame as I wrote if you don't agree. But there seems to be a sequence, and you've really helped me see this. The first part of it is foreign names or styled names in Mayan glyphs. And you found them in the Southwest group, the principal group of the Southwest, with your Akbal dude, right? So they're written in Maya glyphs, but that's not a classic style name. And that's around 900. And then in the mid 900s, we get two that I'm aware of crazy texts that appear with non-Maya iconography, whatever you want to call it, modified fluorescent iconography I like. One is the ball court stone or round stone or whatever. The other is that that unknown tomb capstone, which has Maya glyphs and quote unquote Toltec imagery, whatever you want to call it. And that's probably in the mid 10th century. And then, as you wonderfully pointed out, we have two examples of both scripts, or whatever you want to call them, both writing systems together, circa 1000 AD. One is on the Osario, and the other is in Temple of the Chacmol's. So at that point, almost 100 years later, we have the two writing systems together. And then finally, in the last constructions, and Bill and I are going to argue for the rest of our lives about when they date to. I think they're post 1000, but probably not by too much. The ball court, the warriors, whatever. The Mayan script is gone on carved monuments. Of course, we know it's going on paper somewhere, right? Because we still have that for hundreds of years later. So what I really have learned from you is this, and put it together with the chronology of the site. There's this development, this writing system, which I really agree with you and Peter so much. It's the Chichen writing system. It develops, and it starts to develop maybe a little with naming ideas before the artwork comes in. Then the artwork comes in the 10th century, middle of it. And then there's a transition, at least on monuments, away from quote unquote Mayan writing to the CI system. That's how I see it. And that's, we talked about this. I don't know if I convinced you. I don't, but I think there's such great evidence that you've shown that it took 100 years for all this to take place, this whole process. And that's part of this notion that it's got to be Chichen writing, right? It developed there. It isn't just like suddenly overnight it appears. We see it in writing for names, changing in naming conventions. We see it, the two systems together on two examples, not robust, but two. And then we see the old system, at least on stone, disappearing. So I've learned so much from talking to you in the last week. I'm going to sign off. I hope I didn't go on too long.
Thank you.
All right. Catherine Shirk had a question about, it was very early when you were showing a dog, and she was asking, could that be an example of grass out in front of the dog? I don't know.
Yeah, I like that. It could be two syllables or two logograms put together. I hadn't thought of it as grass, but I didn't know, couldn't think of anything else.
Yeah.
I was wondering if it was like a millipede or something, like a dogapede.
And she just said it could have been to emphasize the size of the dog being small.
Yeah, I don't know about that. It's more likely logographic.
And then Annabeth says, one thing to consider is Central Mexican traditions like Teotihuacan seem to have lots of nouns and names as the emphasis rather than sentences. So in all, the Chichen script may have a lot of Central Mexican affinities.
Well, for sure. That's what I've been saying.
Yeah. Jeffrey's totally excited, but he's got to go. And he says, Bruce is really breaking ground here.
No. Well, like they say, it's amazing what data can do how data can mess up a good theory.
All
But
right.
I'm open, I'm open to conversation with anyone, anytime. And I'm very happy to
Yep.
foster conversation.
And remember if you've got your copy of the Axlander #3, it's a direct link to the catalog at brucelove.com. Also, in that issue are direct links to Michael's email or my email. But I mentioned, some people asked early on about when will the recording appear? And I said a few days after the event, it'll appear on YouTube. But for anybody who's not already on our subscriber lists for the Axlander, please send me your email. It's mayaman@bellsouth.net. And we'll get you, I'll, personally send you the notice on when we have the recording up. But it was great to see everybody here with us. Very interesting subject, Bruce. And is there anything else from anybody? All right, then thank you, Bruce, and let's end it here.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank
George.
you.
Excellent.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Jim.
Good.
Good job.
Thank you, Bruce. Very good.
Lane Sheely says thanks, Bruce. And so
Thank you. Dylan, thank you.
Bye. Thanks, Megan.
Oh, she's here.
Thanks, Jim, very much for your help too.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks,
Hi,
Bruce.
Mary.
Good night.
Hi, Pat. Hi, Mary. Hi,
Mark
everybody.
Dietrich. There's Mary Lou. Hello, Mary Lou. All righty. Well, let's end it there. Thank you, everybody, and especially thank you, Bruce.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Okay.
Thank you. Be in
Bye.
touch.
Adios.